Hello, everybody, and welcome to Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer, recruiting writer for the Osceola.com. I am joined by head editor Bob Ferrante and the man himself, the publisher of the Osceola.com, Jerry Kutz, down beneath me. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me on this Thursday afternoon. Everybody doing all right?
Other than my hair standing straight up.
And that's sports writer chic to have the hair standing up.
We've kind of got a trio of thinning hair problems here at the Osceola.com. It's a common trend that we all have. But speaking of the Osceola.com, obviously some big changes. To quote Charles Bradley, we are going through changes. I bet you didn't think I was old enough to know who Charles Bradley actually was. But we are actually cultured here with the Carlisle household. The Osceola going through some major changes. I guess where to begin, we've had to keep some things quiet. We've had to keep some things quiet for a little while. With the On3 and Rivals merger, the Osceola is no longer part of the Rivals network. And in doing so, we have gone independent and we'll be making a go at things independently. But, you know, that offers us an ability to do some things that we weren't able to do before, offer you some unique perspectives, try to just allowed us to do some fun things. And, you know, we could discuss it a little bit here about what we're offering and how things are going. Obviously, things are not 100% set up all the way yet. The boards are something that are coming along. We've heard you. We're working on it. That's something that we knew we were going to have to take a little bit of extra time to make sure that it's spent enough time in the oven, make sure it's working properly. But that is coming along. Of course, I do want to thank you for all your support, whether that be over through social media for the boards back on Rivals.com, your messages and everything were very appreciated and everything. And as for what that means for the YouTube subscribers who may be watching this in terms of what is coming, we're going to have a YouTube video out maybe in the next week or so with a more organized version of what's going to be coming, what's going to be presented to you at the Osceola, whether that's a free YouTube subscriber here or if you want to invest in the Osceola for the insider content that we're going to be providing not only this month but well into football season. We're going to have something for you a little bit organized. But in terms of just a quick look at what the membership for the Osceola is going to be looking like, we're offering monthly memberships, annual memberships, and a Founders Edition membership ranging from $5 a month, $50 a month, and then the Osceola Founders Edition is $250 per year with some benefits like getting Jerry's personal phone number to talk FSU sports or
That's got some real value.
What's that?
That's real value.
No, I mean, hey, if you guys can get Jerry Kutz on the phone more frequently than we get Jerry Kutz on the phone, you guys have gotten a pretty damn good deal, if I do say so myself. But as I said, we're going to have videos on that in the future on the YouTube channel, give you a better look at what we're going to be providing soon. But some stuff to cover today, some stuff to get through. Well, first of all, Jerry, I kind of want to open the floor to you. Obviously, you and Bob specifically have been working tirelessly through the past month to make sure that this transition is going smoothly. Just talk a little bit about the process and a little bit, I guess, tell people what they can be expecting with the Osceola and what we're striving to do.
First, let me give a shout out to Shalom. We're rocking with you too, man.
Absolutely.
Nick, I want to back up. You mentioned earlier that we had to keep things quiet. And let me just explain that Osceola, when we joined the Rivals Network, we were basically a content provider and managed the site. But it's owned by Rivals, and all the subscribers are owned by Rivals. And in fact, all the content that we wrote is owned by Rivals. So, but we had a contract with them, and we went into it with eyes wide open. And so when Rivals got bought by On3, I kind of had you kind of knew they're not going to run two sites at Florida. And On3 already has a good Florida State website in War Chant. So Bob and I got together and said, we better, discuss what's our next step. What's the next iteration from the Osceola? That was 60 days before we launched. they were going to do it July 31st, and then they asked us if they could buy us out of the last month of our contract because they wanted to go June 30th, which was great. I have to say, the president of On3 has just been terrific to work with. He's class act. And I like the idea that even though we don't get to keep the subscribers, I like the idea that they're merging them into one. I think that's a smart business decision for On3, and I think it's good for the readers, because the people that were our readers at Osceola on Rivals, it'll be seamless for them. Their passwords, it's good to go. Now, those people who still want to follow us, they've been finding their way over to the Osceola and subscribing. And that's that was the thing that they may have paid for, wanting the Osceola, and then on the first they clicked on the Osceola, boom, and it's War Chant. And so we didn't want to charge the same price, but so we charged half price, and we thought that's a way to meet our readers halfway. If they want to come over, we'd love to have them, but we can't charge them $99.95 after they've already paid that. So we thought, we are independent. We're rebuilding a circulation now for the third time.
It's a daunting task. It's a little bit of Groundhog's Day, isn't it?
But it's also gratifying, because I get up every morning and I look to see who's subscribed, and I see a lot of old friends that had been with us since the 80s, and they followed us pretty much wherever we've gone, and that's gratifying and humbling. Yeah. But at any rate, so that's why we couldn't announce anything. We were on Rivals, not Rivals so much as on Three's timeline, and again, I couldn't have asked for a better. If you're going to get told that, you can't stay here. It's closing time. You can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here. They were really class about it, and all good in the neighborhood, and we're excited. I'm really happy to be back to independent, and no regrets. We learned a lot, and we just keep rocking.
Yeah, absolutely. No ill will at all. I echo your sentiments completely about it not only being a smart business decision for the folks at On3, but truly a class act in the way that they handle things. And, though it's going to be a challenge, obviously rebuilding circulation for the third time, as Jerry mentioned, I think like I mentioned, it offers us some opportunities to do things that are a little bit more in our niche, things that we excel at, whether that be the business side of Florida State athletics, but also I think we do a really good job of making our way through the fluff and providing readers with exactly what they need to know in a timely manner. And I know I speak for Jerry and Bob when I say that we are looking forward to not only meeting that challenge, but also providing you the information and the inside information on Florida State sports that you deserve. Some of that information being recruiting, as we're not going to be completely tossing away recruiting with our transition away from a recruiting service, if you will, with Rivals and On3. We're still going to be doing some recruiting, and obviously that involves covering commitments, and Florida State did get a big one yesterday with the commitment of consensus 4-star Ernest Rankins out of Southwest DeKalb, and I believe in Decatur, Georgia. Consensus 4-star prospect. He committed to Florida State over Auburn. Yesterday, the Seminoles first offered him in January 2025, but really Florida State didn't get too involved in this one until Terrence Knighton visited his high school during the spring and scheduled an official visit with him. His official visit to Florida State, I believe, was the weekend of the 6th. That was his first visit on campus, and the coaching staff did a fantastic job, ended up doing enough in order to eventually leapfrog Auburn in his pecking order. They did win out, obviously, for that commitment, and now he joins James Carrington, Tico Cretendon Jr., and Whitley Cadeau along a interior defensive line class, guys, that is looking really nice. this is a fantastic win for Terrence Knighton and co. One that, frankly, a couple weeks ago I had my doubts that they would be able to win. I felt like they had some catching up to do, and maybe you can go in and argue and say this has a little bit more about what Auburn has going on with their recruiting right now, because Hugh's been on the struggle bus. Let's put it that way. Obviously, Florida State flipping Devin Carter away from the Tigers. They had another 4-star wide receiver. I think probably one of their last nameplate guys in their recruiting class went to flip to Kentucky. It's been a rough going for the Tigers, but I did want to ask you guys kind of what your perception is of how this Florida State staff how they've recruited over the last month or so, because normally it's been me and Pat talking recruiting over the past 2 months or so. I want to get your thoughts on the recruiting class from your perspective, the outside looking in. How pleased are you with what they've been able to do, going from 2-10 last season to having a fringe top 10 recruiting class, depending on which recruiting service you're subscribed to, either 12th, I think, and On3, or I think you are actually top 10 right now if you're following the 247 composite. When you take a look at this staff and what they've been able to do, how impressed are you, Bob?
I think we have to put it in the context, coming off 2-10, coming off a history where you have not yet developed a high school offensive recruit into a developmental player who's been drafted by the NFL. It would have been nice if Lawrence Toafili had been drafted, but I think there can be some negative recruiting against this Florida State staff right now. If you're an opposing coach, you can say a lot of things about Mike Norvell and the offensive staff. They haven't put guys who are high school recruits in the NFL. They have had Keon Coleman. They have had Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell. They've had a lot of great transfers that they should get credit for developing. But making that journey from the high school senior who signs, who's developed, who's been here 3-4 years and becomes an NFL guy, I think that's been a knock against Mike Norvell and the staff. So I want to put that into context. Now we're seeing a top 10-ish, top 15 class being built with some pretty decent balance on offense and defense. I know there's no Jack Edge guy yet. This is not a filled out class in mid-December on signing day. This is a work in progress product of a commitment class that candidly Florida State has to keep it together. You have to show on the field you are fun to watch, that you have playmakers on offense, that you have a 3-3-5 defense that's adaptable but fun to play in. Your prospects want to see that, even though they've made commitments, so that they then sign in December. I think when we look at all those kind of contextual elements, you have to maybe stop and take a minute and say, so far, so good as far as this class is shaping up.
Any thoughts, Jerry?
Yeah, I do. I mentioned this to Bob and to a few other people the last week. I don't think it's any coincidence that Mike has had a run here of late. The last 2 weeks, they've been rolling in, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what happened that preceded that? What happened was the Florida Board of Governors gave Florida State and every other school in the state the lift they needed by allowing affiliate, FSU auxiliary revenues to be shared with the colleges, the state universities in Florida, to satisfy this $20.5 million revenue share need. Now think about that just a second. Prior to the Board of Governors approving that, where was the money going to come from to share? There's not an athletic department in the state that makes a profit. And the rule has always been in Florida that athletic departments had to be self-sufficient, right? Other states didn't have that view. The other states, they could fund public education, public athletics, but not in Florida. So we ran about a $16 to $20 million deficit every year. And that's what Seminole Boosters and, Gator Boosters was formed for the purpose of. Was we raised up to $26 million, I think is what Daryl and the boosters have to raise right now in the annual fund to balance the athletic budget. So what 20.5 million are you going to share? And, you know, imagine yourself a salesman and you're out there talking to, you know, a prospect and you don't have a manufacturing plant. You know what I mean? You're trying to sell them a product, but, you know, once you come to Florida State, but I don't know how I'm going to pay you, you know?
Is it truly that simple though? Like, do you think it's that simple as where there is just an influx of money into the situation here? Because I think certainly from my perspective, being down there and talking to the kids the past few months, I do think that there's a certain level of these kids are having better relationships with these coaches than say the coaches that were here last year. I think Tony White specifically is a guy that has done a really good job of not only explaining his defense to these kids, but is very personable. And that's something that, let's be frank, Adam Fuller was not a great personality with younger kids, at least the high school guys. So is it really that simple to where there was just a money influx, or do these coaches deserve a little bit more credit here?
Well, no, we're going to get to that. And but let me say this. Is oxygen important? Not
well, when you put it like that.
I mean, if you don't have it, it becomes urgent. It becomes very important. All the other stuff doesn't matter if you don't have oxygen. And so I think that this, with the influx of being able to revenue share and knowing where the money was going to come from, eliminated the desperate need for the oxygen. All right. And I wanted to turn this to you, Nick, because Bob and I, and you know, you and I have talked about this as well. You're down there more than I am talking to the recruits. I've had a history of it over a very long period of talking to prospects. You've had more current experience. But I think I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone who said, you know, it's just a damn shame that it's come down to NIL. Kid chooses where he's going to go because of NIL. Well, I don't believe that. I really don't. I think if all things are equal, if you're going to be able to share revenue with me, it doesn't have to be equal with the other people or more. It really doesn't. I just need to know my basic needs are going to get met. I think the number one and two things that prospects want to know, to Bob's earlier point, is can you develop me? Because the NFL money is a lot more than what this NIL is, right? So I think kids want to know, first of all, that they got oxygen. But beyond that, then their number one thing is, can you develop me? I think culture, how they fit in with the other players on campus, what their connection with the coaches is. It's probably what we call culture, the new buzzword. But I think those two things are more important. If the money's the same, or even not even the same, it satisfies my needs, I'm really interested in development, and do I get along with the coaches and the other players? What do you think?
Yeah, you and I talked about this, and I think the one position that you could see that truly being a factor is wide receiver. I think you take a look at what Florida State did at wide receiver last year and just how poor the wide receiver play was. Not only that, even going back to December of 2023, when Florida State was going after a prospect like Jeremiah Smith. And we all know the type of player that Jeremiah Smith turned into. I mean, he's going to be the best wide receiver in college football this year, instantly going into the draft, maybe the best wide receiver in the National Football League, or at least in the top 5. That kid's a stud. You had players on your roster telling you that the coaching at wide receiver wasn't that great as far back as December of 2023. Devin Carter is a prospect that, at least in my opinion, part of the reason why he decommitted from Florida State initially is because he also saw that the development at wide receiver was not that great. Despite, how well Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman did, and and obviously there's some other prospects worked in there. Take a look at the reputation that Tim Harris has and the relationships that he has throughout all of South Florida. I think Devin Carter coming on campus and seeing the difference in the coaching is a big reason as to why Florida State was able to get back in his recruitment, and the ability to see development in that short window. He came for 2 spring practices, being able to see the development. And obviously there's a long way to go. I think there's more factors in that recruitment than just that, but you'll be able to see the practices into the fall, be able to get a better idea, and hopefully you'll be able to see results on the field. I think that the promise of better development and the promise of better relationships, I think that plays a lot. And I think that's played a lot in not only Devin Carter flipping his commitment. I think that also played a factor in Jason Lopez committing. I think that also played a factor in a guy like Brandon Bennett committing, who also is a guy that has a very tight relationship to somebody on the staff. So I think to your point, the combination of the relationships and the development is still a big factor here. And I always take it from the perspective of, well, truly, if NIL is the variable, right? And the idea and thinking, well, if FSU was offering me $1 million, let's just put it like a blank number, right? If FSU is offering me $1 million and I can get 1.5 at Texas, just for an example, if relationships truly matter, wouldn't they matter more now than ever? If you are trying to land a kid, wouldn't you want your staff to be able to develop relationships and recruit to the level of saying, well, we want you, we have a great relationship, why would you need to go anywhere else for a little bit of extra money? Like you would hope that your relationships trumps everything in terms of NIL. So that's kind of where I come from with that. I do think that development still plays a major part of it. And I think that goes back to the question that I asked maybe 10 minutes ago now. We've been rambling about this, but is it truly as simple as an influx of NIL, or should we give these coaches some credit in terms of the relationships that they've been able to build? Bob, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts if you have any.
Yeah, I think we've got kind of a perfect storm where the money arrived at the right time as the June decisions were being made following the official visits. This is the prime time where the 18 to 19-year-old is making the decision coming off the summer visits. It's no longer really the fall official visit, I want to go see the Miami game or the Florida game. It's much more, this calendar has shifted all the way up in a lot of my views. I think the staff deserves a ton of credit. Again, 6 new assistant coaches for building relationships or bringing them from their prior schools, be it UCF or other schools. There's guys, we've talked for years, 5 or more years, about how Mike Norvell didn't have enough recruiting ties down into Miami, into Fort Lauderdale, into West Palm. He's got guys who have ties, down into South Florida, especially Coach Harris, on the wide receivers. So I think that's really, really important. Yes. But at the end of the day, this is great to say Florida State's a leader in the clubhouse, so to speak, with a top 10 or top 15 class on July 3rd, but show it on the field with the development of the current players. And then your December results are going to be really, really good. Conversely, if the product on the field doesn't look fun for the current players, it's not going to look fun for the prospects and the fans, right? And you have a question mark really going to that December signing window. I think I see validity in what everything you guys are saying, because you guys bring different perspectives. Nick covering that day to day, and Jerry kind of following the money path, right? But I want to see it on the field. I think that's where a lot of fans and media are. Football is going to be played on August 30th, and after that, show me what it looks like as far as then convincing these prospects that they made the right decision to commit to Florida State.
I want to stick a pin in that, and we'll come back to it because I agree. And we've been saying this on Seminole Sidelines for the past month and a half. Joke, we got to get it tattooed on our foreheads. A lot of this is dependent on how well the team performs when it comes time to battle in the trenches on August 30th and through the rest of the season. We can talk all this
at every campus in the country.
Yeah, and that's the way it is for every campus on the country, but especially for a program that's hoping to have a bounce back year. And in some ways, there's a coaching staff that maybe the fire is a little hot beneath their feet a little bit. Some more than others, obviously. There's a bunch of coaches that just got here. I do want to quickly go through a couple of other recruiting things to wrap up just this little section, because there's been a bit of a period between the last show. And this one, Florida State did get a 2027 tight end commit in Connor Wynn. He's a kid that camped at FSU this June, where he was offered 6'3", 215 pounds, a composite 3-star tight end prospect, had Power 4 offers from Maryland, Syracuse, Rutgers, and UCF. Chris Thompson doesn't get the flowers that I think he deserves on the recruiting trail, guys. I mean, talk about getting a tight end and Xavier Tiller, and he's in it for a couple of other tight ends in the 2026 class, but he's done a really good job at, I think, building out his board, not only through this summer, but earlier in the year. I don't think Chris Thompson gets enough credit for the job that he's done. So Florida State, after losing a couple of 2027 commitments earlier this summer, gets another one back on the board. Obviously, 2027 is a long way to go. We talk about it all the time. In terms of 2026 is cleaning up some other stuff. 4-star wide receiver Keon Chapman has committed to North Carolina. That's not really a surprise here. It was Florida State versus North Carolina, and pretty much since Jason Lopez committed to Florida State, I had the impression that he was going to go to North Carolina with his brother. Florida State, it's kind of curious to see where their position was, because they haven't really been recruiting big receivers this cycle, unless they were can't miss prospects. And I just wasn't sure if Florida State viewed him as a can't miss prospect to add him to what is already 5 wide receivers. 4-star Keyshawn Eliezer committed to Stanford. He was one of Florida State's primary jack targets, a big, lengthy kid, but also he's very good academically, so it makes sense that he would choose Stanford. I think he's got like a 4.3, 4.4 GPA, something like that. 4-star flip target, Xavier Kearns shut down his recruitment. He's going to be sticking with South Carolina. Cam Brickle, 3-star defensive tackle. He was here at Florida State on an official visit, has committed to Ohio State. Basically, with Florida State loading up on the interior defensive line, his spot kind of got moved out in a way, and Florida State wasn't a factor in the end of that. And there's a couple of linebackers that are going to be coming off the board soon. DQ Forkba and Rodney Colton, Florida State in good positions for both of them. Obviously, it's Florida versus Florida State for DQ. We've talked about that quite frequently on the show. And then Rodney Colton is another prospect that we've been talking about or hearing that is getting a lot more traction with Florida State. And could go back and forth until his decision date, which is July 12th. And this is where I was originally going to segue into the house settlement, because I do believe that NIL is a factor in that recruitment. And of course, we've already brushed on it briefly, but just to rehash a little bit, coming into effect on June 1st, schools will be allowed to share revenue directly with student athletes up to an annual cap of $20.5 million. And 75% is expected to go toward football. This is not Florida State. Obviously, this is all schools in the state of Florida. Now, all of that talking, to go back to the pin that we put in earlier, Bob, where you talk about the development into the season. With this influx of money, say there is a world that Florida State was able to front load and put some extra investment into the NIL for some of these guys this summer. Does that help Florida State's chances of holding on to some of these guys in the fall? Or is it purely about the development and where things stand on the football field?
I think it'd be naive for us to say that the opportunity to front load contracts across the country has been utilized. Look at Texas Tech, which has almost gone from a I won't say nothing, but a mid-tier, multiple programs in the mid-tier of their conference to a win away from a women's College World Series title in softball. Look at how programs have used NIL and then down the road revenue share, but also these front-loaded contracts that have really pushed the marketplace to numbers that are exceedingly higher and higher. I think we've heard quarterback numbers that went from $1 million or $2 million to now it's $3 million or $4 million in 12 months or so. So again, that marketplace was pushed higher and higher and higher. I'm of the belief that I think Florida State has positions itself as well as possible into this revenue share era. My questions moving forward that I don't really have a good answer for is, how do you manage that marketing side, that branding side of the athlete? How do you pursue the Powerade deals, the Mizuno bat deal for, say, a Miles Bailey? How do you help Issa Torres on the softball side? How do you fund the Olympic sports that want to be competitive and win titles when football needs money, when men's basketball needs money
Desperately
too?
needs money.
So,
women's basketball too desperately needs money.
I kind of just raise questions rhetorically. I don't say I have answers. I think
it's another show.
we
Yeah.
go into July 1 with the curiosity. I think we've used that word so much about NIL that's now 4 years old. Now it's rev share and NIL. We still have newer questions, I guess, about how it's all going to play out.
Yeah, Jerry. So you said earlier you're kind of the mind that you don't think there's a coincidence between Florida State's recruiting success over the last month and the House settlement deal. Do you also fall under the same thinking that that this is going to continue into the season and that this is going to matter and affect what happens in terms of holding on to and getting recruits in season as well?
So I want to frame what I said a little bit more accurately. Is I think it's like oxygen. It's just important. And if you don't have it, it becomes uber important. But they have it now. Mm-hmm. And I think now you have to give the credit to the coaches who, got these kids on campus when they really weren't sure what they had. And have made real progress. I mean, like to your point, Nick, and we've got a cornerback coach and a wide receiver coach who are putting guys in that they can develop you. I mean, it's been proven at cornerback. So yeah, development's super important, and performance on the field is also very important. But I don't think any of it happens unless you have the ability to actually offer the kid a competitive deal. And one thing we haven't talked about at all, it's so funny to me, in all of this conversation, we're getting ready to open a $150 million, 150,000 square foot football operations facility. And there was a time when facilities were, oh my gosh, it's a arms race. They were so important. Well, have they lost importance? Are they overshadowed now by revenue share? And I don't think they are. I think you have to throw that factor in too. There's a wow factor there when these kids come on campus and see the commitment FSU has made to their sport. That I think in the perfect storm Bob mentioned, it was working against Florida State the last 3 or 4 years. It's now working for Florida State, where the facilities will be ready this fall when the kids come on there, to visit. They're going to be able to walk through the building and see it.
Yeah.
And the revenue share is there. If Florida State is winning and our fans are having fun and talking positive again on the message boards where these recruits lurk, positive things can happen. I mean, I think November comes and FSU's in good position.
Yeah.
But it's all got to come together. It's not one thing. It's not like, what is it, City Slickers, where it's one thing.
Well, I think there's a good point because you talk to kids and they say, well, all facilities are pretty much the same when you're getting recruited by all these schools. But then they turn around and they see and they go into the virtual reality room, which I think Florida State has wanted to keep on the lower side of things. I don't think they want too much publicity about that. But I've seen multiple clips of some offensive linemen working with Herb Hand in this virtual reality training room and how much of a difference that could make. Don't get it twisted. These facilities can make a huge difference for Florida State football to have their own slice of the, I guess, athletic facilities. So it is super important.
When you talk about development, right?
That is where it is.
That's like really important.
Yeah.
How are you going to develop kids without the facilities? And so we built the indoor practice facility for that reason. And that was a game changer.
Yeah.
I was very involved in the campaign for that money. And, you have to be sold to sell something. So I needed Jimbo to sell me on why the hell do we need an indoor practice facility when Mickey Andrews got it done right out there. And his point was time management. When we would be on the field and Tallahassee gets its 4:30 lightning storm, you got to go into the locker room, wait it out, come back out, finish your practice. Well, that's easy for the players. What about all the people that work for that do the tutoring?
Yeah.
Now they're pushed back 2 hours. What about the training staff and everybody's pushed back? And now the player, instead of being done at 6 o'clock, eating, going to study hall, he's not getting to eat until 8 o'clock at night, and study hall's compromised.
Yeah.
So those facilities, I became convinced, are important. And to your point, Nick, that virtual reality, I don't really know how it works. That'll be another podcast, but I can see how that would be really helpful, where you can simulate it on the dance floor rather than, taking a beating on the practice field.
Yeah, and especially with being able to get kids in that room. Maybe they're struggling with injuries, can't get those reps, live reps. I think virtual reality reps are about the second best thing you can do to live reps, I imagine.
And I don't want people to think that there'll be less, contact. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But it'll be better practice than just watching film.
Yeah, absolutely. Tackling some questions here while you deal with Daisy's got an opinion on it as well. Any updates on 4-star wide receiver Camden Capehart? He is committed to Mississippi State. My understanding of the situation is that, and this kind of goes along with Woody's question as well, if you're both still here, I think Florida State is done at wide receiver right now. I think 5 is about as max as they'll go unless they get a guy that they truly can't miss out on, like a Calvin Russell or a Caden Prothro. As far as my understanding is, they're not in it for either of those guys. Calvin Russell has technically placed Florida State in his top 3. I have not gotten any indication that Florida State is going to be the school that he chooses. There could be surprises, but I don't believe that there are going to be any additions to wide receivers. I think 5 is where they sit at right now, and there's not going to be any more. So unless anything happens to the wide receiver commitments at this time, Capehart is probably a guy that they're looking at down the road, especially since Capehart is a 5'9" slot guy, and they've got 2 of the better slot guys committed this cycle with Jason Lopez, and I do believe Devin Carter's probably viewed as a slot receiver as well. So I think they're probably done there at receiver, and I would imagine that Capehart's a down-the-line guy, a break glass in case of emergency type prospect. I do think that if you do have to break that glass, that there's a good chance that they could land the kid, but I don't think he's a factor right now. How much of a factor has Devin Rispress been in recruiting? Anytime you can get a guy on campus that is able to be able to, for lack of a better term, vibe and really kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Identify and be able to work well with kids, it's a factor, it's a plus. But I do think that the success shouldn't just be giving credit to Rispress. I think there's other guys on the staff that have made an uptick in how they do and how they go through their day-to-day recruiting operations. I think Dimitri Emanuel is a guy that is done a lot of really good work. He's really applied himself to his trade. Obviously, he used to work with the offensive line. They moved him to defensive line. I think it was at the beginning of January this year, they actually moved him to work with the defensive lineman. And considering what they've been able to do this recruiting class thus far at defensive line, I think Meach deserves a lot of credit here. He's certainly a guy that is taking the hand that was given to him and is running with it. So Rispress has been a great addition to the staff, but I don't think his impact has been anything more substantial than anything else that some of the other guys are doing and some of the work that they're putting in between new recruiting assistants and new assistant coaches or off-field analysts. I think everybody has come together to put in a really good effort here. And while Rispress has been a great addition, and it's certainly valuable to have a guy that can really be able to connect with these kids. That's the word I was looking for this entire time, is connect with them. It's been a factor, but I think there's a lot of other guys that deserve their flowers as well. We've gone a little bit over, but we're having a really good conversation. So I do want to jump here. Kind of something a little bit similar, and we'll only touch about it briefly, but something similar to go along with the house settlement is the CBS Sports article that came out. I believe it was a couple of days ago, maybe a little bit beforehand, detailing the contract process with the revenue sharing. I believe that's roughly what the argument or what the article was about. Report from CBS Sports' Chris Hummer that Basically, the tenets of the article was that the language of the contract, specifically with Florida State, was very aggressive in nature. That was the word, that was the hot word, which was aggressive. Florida State did release a statement that said, as we enter into a new age of college athletics, Florida State has put together an agreement that provides deliverables and expectations for all parties. Each individual situation will be unique, and the hypotheticals are impossible to predict. However, we are committed to continuing to provide an elite experience for our student athletes in all aspects of their collegiate career. Florida State is looking forward to the mutually beneficial partnerships with our student athletes in this new era. So I'm sure Florida State fans weren't too happy to have this article dropped right after a slew of success on the recruiting field, or the recruiting trail rather. But Bob, you and I were talking about this prior to the show in terms of maybe what this article does and what it means and what it doesn't mean, and how Florida State is probably the named school among other schools that are probably doing similar things, maybe to a different effect, and how the language is being worked in each of these contracts. Do you have thoughts on how this is going to affect things? If this is a big deal, if this is not a big deal, if Florida State is kind of just being made to look a little bit poorly here? Because I think it's important, and there is a quote that I actually do want to share before you answer this, is a quote from the article that says, "I don't think Florida State is the worst at all in this business," said an agent with a player on FSU's roster. "There are schools I trust less." So is this a huge deal? Is this going to fly over everybody's heads and eventually people are going to forget about it? What's your opinion on not only the timing of the article, but how this kind of shapes the perception of this recruiting run that they've been on?
I think we'll start with, there are no standardized contracts on a conference level, on a national level, on a state level. We might have 136 FBS programs this year. There might be 136 different types of contracts. They might be similar. They might be more similar than they are different. If you want to follow me when I'm saying that, their language might just be a little bit different. Now, an agent being unhappy doesn't bother me all that much. There are hundreds and hundreds of agents across college athletics.
Thousands.
Maybe thousands, right, Jerry? And guess what? How many of them are actually licensed
None.
to do any of this let's call business, in air quotes, guys?
Yeah.
In the NFL, you are licensed as an agent. In the NBA, you are licensed as an agent. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's the same in MLB and NHL and MLS and women's basketball and the WNBA. We, as a college athletics complex, are short on standardization across 50 states. We, as a complex, are short on training and standards for agents. That's an issue.
Yeah.
Now, if an agent wants to grumble about the language in a contract to a national writer at CBS, no problem, buy it. I'm sure there are issues with contracts across the country. But the bigger issue to me is we got the people who are advising athletes need some level of training. And that, to me, is like the next frontier. How do not we the media, but how do we take action? ADs, conference commissioners, how do mom and dads handle this kind of stuff? Because I don't know if I have a great answer, but we got to figure this out. I mean, this is a big deal.
Well, also, I think the language also, and maybe some context here, is this is coming from a program that has had, shall we say, adventurous negotiations with some of the players on its roster, and the flirtations with the portal over the last 2 years that maybe could have made this language a little bit more protective, a little bit more aggressive, as the article would have called it, towards what are they proposing to their players now, who at the time of the writing of the article, not every rostered player had received their contract of the revenue sharing, but that was an ongoing thing. So I imagine that this thing is maybe not going to be played out too much longer, but these kids are going to go over their contracts and agree with everything. I think also part of the problem, or not necessarily the problem, but some of the issues that were raised is some of the language around the injuries here. And even to a lesser extent, there was one school that had a clause that they can terminate a contract if any criminal charges or activity is reported, and that's without due process. So if there's a Jaylen Brown situation where the player is kicked off a team for either misdemeanors or criminal activity, that school that was mentioned in the article could just say, "Hey, see ya, thank you. You violated the terms of the contract," and due process is out the window. So there's some interesting, like, I think, comparisons between not only what was reported about Florida State's contract, but some of the things that were reported for other teams' contracts. And what I think the big one also is that something that I touched on is, what about injuries? If you injure yourself playing pickup basketball, which we were talking about before the show, about if you injure yourself playing pickup basketball and now you're done for the season, what kind of position does that leave the team in? What kind of position does it leave the program in versus, hey, I pulled a hamstring a la Hakeem Williams in fall camp, going after a pass. What does that do now for my NIL? So I think the language is very protective and aggressive, but you can see both sides there. Jerry, you have a point.
Yeah, I do. First of all, on the NIL, if you're the auto dealer that has made a contract with Hakeem Williams to represent the dealership and to do
as an example, we are obviously aware that Hakeem Williams is now in Boulder, Colorado, but that just the example that came to my mind in terms of unfortunate injuries, which, I mean, to be fair,
but it makes
a couple of them.
Yeah, but whether he's here or he's there, the point of it is that if his value to that car dealer is diminished upon that injury, I mean, and that's true for any commercial contract you go into. If you aren't able to perform what they expected, the contract's not worth as much. Yeah. And so, this is the real life that these players are getting into. And I do want to say this. Well, let me say this on conclusion to that. I think that these contracts need to be realistic, that these contracts are the same kind of contracts these kids are going to be signing when they get to the NFL. They need to learn that this is how the world works, right? They shouldn't get any special advantage. So, to me, that we have an obligation to do that. This is college athletics, for crying out loud. This isn't some fly-by-night beer league, I mean, we're supposed to have higher standards. But at any rate, the point I wanted to make, going back to the agents, and I made this point when we were doing our interview with Michael Alford, is back when Foot Locker happened, when, Nate Seabrun and what was that, 93 team? Yeah, 94 right. Happened in the, it hit Sports Illustrated in 94 after we'd won the 93 national championship. Those agents were unlicensed. The NFL, there were like 2 or 3 times as many agents as there were NFL players. And there had to be some standardization at the pro level. So I brought that up to Alford and when we were talking, and we're going through that now at the college level. And I think sometimes you didn't have the need to worry about this until you got some of these other lawsuits resolved, right? You could be working on it in the background. But now that these contracts are resolved, NIL starts, the Deloach thing will start. There'll be lawsuits. And it'll expose the agent problem for what it is. And then people will begin to address it. So I think it's linear and it's not in parallel. They've discussed these problems, but they haven't had an absolute need to solve them yet. But I think we'll see some things happen. There'll be some lawsuits, and then the spotlight will be cast on agent licensing, registration, training. I remember when Florida State dealt with this, there was actually agent training. We brought the players in and taught them, how the agents were supposed to behave. And we had some agents come in and train our players. I think Martin Mayhew even spoke to the players at that time.
Yeah,
So,
Lee Steinberg was here, Jerry. I was a student on campus, and I heard Lee Steinberg, the super agent, was going to be here to speak to athletes, and then he spoke to some college students, and he's telling stories about Troy Aikman and Steve Young, but he's also talking about his pitch to athletes, and hey, it's about doing things the right way and through the NCAA bylaws and such. So, I mean, Florida State's been active. We're going back into the mid '90s. This is not a new issue.
Thank you for dating it, because I was thinking pre-Vietnam War, back when you were in college, and I have the authority to say stuff like that as now the officially youngest member of the Osceola team.
Man, where's that?
I'm in charge now. As anyways, we have well exceeded our talking time today. We did want to keep this short, but I guess the Osceola has a problem with serial yapping. Just a lot of just this sometimes.
We put a different guy in the same seat, and but it's fun. And we
like almost maybe like just a possession, just an absorption of skill sets and tendencies. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today for this episode of Seminole Sidelines. I guess quickly before we go, Jerry, if you do want to say or give any information on where subscribers or potential readers can reach you in the event if you're having any trouble. If you're watching this now live, or if you're watching this back later, listening to it on Spotify or any of the other streaming platforms, if you are trying to subscribe to the new Osceola website, or if you're trying to sign up for the newsletter, whatever it be, if you're trying to find us, we want to find you as well. We want to work with you to make sure that the transition to the new platform is as smooth as it can be. So, Jerry, if you want to give out any information on how
look at that thing scroll across the bottom.
that big scroll. Perhaps your email, anything else you want to give out.
Sure. So go to the Osceola.com to subscribe. Osceola.com.
And the link is in the description. It should be in the YouTube description for those that are watching on YouTube right now.
You got to watch out though, because if you go, type it in, just hit enter, and it'll take you to the right site. If you look down, they haven't caught up with it yet. And so if you type in the Osceola, it might take you to the rival site.
Right, which has now been redirected to On3. So there's a lot of cache and cookies going on right now that may lead you to the wrong place. But please in any rate, and I just want to jump ahead of you, if you are having any problems whatsoever, you can reach out to any of us here on Seminole Sidelines, whether that be myself, Bob, or Jerry, in terms of helping you find your way.
First couple of days, we had some glitches. Today, it's been running smooth. And if you can get a website up, I likened it to a shotgun wedding. We told that we needed to build a new house, and we had 60 days to do it. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't go live until, 12:01 a.m. And, so I anticipated we would have a few glitches. And if this is all we had, it's a miracle, So today it's running really good. So go to the Osceola.com and you can subscribe either for free. There's a free choice. And then there's where you get some premium content, and you get all the content if you subscribe. But right now we're putting content up for free, just so as we work through this transition. But if you have a problem, reach out to me, and I'm Jay Kutz at theosceola.com, or you can call me on my cell phone. It's a benefit of being a founder. What the heck? Call me at 850-508-8690. So if you're having
within business hours, by the way, for some of you late guys who like to stay up super late, the line owls.
I'm one of them. So.
Okay, then I guess it's open season. Anyways, everybody, thank you so much for watching Seminole Sidelines. Thank you so much for your viewership and your support. We'll be back with a show soon. I'm not sure exactly when that will be, but there will definitely be a video on the Osceola YouTube channel telling you a little bit more concretely what this transition means for us and what you will be providing, or what you will be provided, not only at the Osceola.com, but on the Osceola YouTube channel. Bob, thank you so much for joining. Jerry, thank you so much for joining. I'm Nick Carlisle. I've been your host today for Seminole Sidelines. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye, and have a great 4th of July, everybody.